Okay, so we encourage everyone to please participate, contribute to what promises to be a very engaging conversation, obviously, if you are also fully present within the session. All right. So without any further ado, I'll jump straight onto the program of the day. And so we officially commence today's program. And it is my pleasure to welcome from the DSTI, Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, Dr. Tshepang Mosia, who is Chief Director for Innovation for Inclusive Development. So he will give us the overview of the Innovation for Inclusive Development Seminar, which is what we're having today. So without any further ado, Dr. Mosia, I will step down and hand over to you.
Right. Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tshepang Mosia. I'm a Chief Director for Innovation for Inclusive Development in the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. So this event is very important for us. We host it as an Innovation for Inclusive Development seminar. And thanks to the CSIR just for organizing this very important event. Through these seminars, we share knowledge, evidence, and lessons learned from technology pilots to influence policy and practice. Circular economy is one of the DSTI's innovation policy priorities. There is a strong focus and emphasis on circular economy in the STI, Decadal Plan 2022-2032. So the Decadal Plan recognizes the circular economy as a key driver for economic growth, job creation, and climate resilience. Africa also has got a circular economy strategy that was developed by the DSTI in partnership with the CSIR. So this strategy is really designed to move our economy from a take, make, waste model to a sustainable system where materials are used, reused, and repaired and recycled. So the circular economy strategy has prioritized 3 resource-intensive economic sectors, namely the agricultural sector, which is implemented by the University of the Free State, the manufacturing sector implemented by the NCPC, and the mining sector implemented by the Northwest University. Now, this circular economy strategy is implemented and supported through sub-strategies operating through a hub and spoke model, where the universities are the hubs and they interact with a number of industry ecosystem players. There are many circular economy initiatives and demonstration projects that have been supported and implemented. For example, through the circular economy biannual calls, there's about 11 projects that were awarded across these economic sectors. So circular economy living labs are also currently being demonstrated. Now, the question we should ask ourselves is, what does the circular economy mean for human settlements, the built environment, and the cities? The circular economy offers enormous opportunities for inclusion of youth, women, and SMMEs to boost local economic development and to drive transformation in cities. A good example of this is the launch of the automated refill stations in the sale of fast-moving consumer goods, the FMCG, in low-income areas. The automated refill station project was launched in Diepsloot in Gauteng in 2025. The project focused on developing refilling stations for fast-moving consumer goods in low-income areas. This retail model helps reduce plastic waste by allowing shoppers to refill essential goods such as cooking oil, maize meal, sugar, cleaning products using their own containers, thereby offering significant cost savings for lower income households. This intervention targeted human settlement sector, particularly the informal retail setting. Another good example is the recent launch of the non-crit modular zero carbon roof and flooring system project. This is an initiative launched by the DSTI through the Circular Innovation South Africa for a non-crit modular zero carbon roof and flooring system and this took place on the 25th of March 2026. This was one of the 8 projects supported by the Circular Economy Demonstration Fund. These projects demonstrate the use of novel building technology in real-world setting by constructing a building in a Landskloof community using a novel concrete product that includes woody biomass sourced from the eradication of alien invasive species near the Landskloof area. On the 7th of December 2025, a knowledge exchange on circular economy in the global South cities was hosted between Panama and South Africa. The DSTI Innovation for Inclusive Development team, together with the CSIR, coordinated this visit by circular economy practitioners, including international stakeholders from the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium member countries. These experts gathered in South Africa with TIPC researchers as part of the TIPC-led project exploring practical applications of circular economy principles in urban settings. Finally, the Science, Technology and Innovation for Sustainable Human Settlements Roadmap supports circular economy projects in human settlements. This roadmap is also an initiative of the DSTI implemented in partnership with the CSIR, as well as the National Department of Human Settlements, to deploy technology and innovation in sustainable human settlements. One of the clusters or pathways on this roadmap is about circular economy in human settlements and in cities. The vision is really to support circular economy initiatives that demonstrate the use of materials, support supply chains, the design and the operation of neighborhoods and settlements, with a focus on reuse of resources and the reduction of waste and recycling, and ensuring that there is protected biodiversity. So with these words, I want to wish everyone who's participating in the session here productive and constructive discussions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Musia. I think it's quite impressive to look at the wide variety of initiatives that are taking place in South Africa currently. And we also thank the DSTI, obviously, for advancing the dialogue around innovation that truly responds to South Africa's development priorities. So thank you so much, Dr. Musia. So without any further ado, I will now, as you prepare yourself, Mark, I will allow Mark the stage, who is pretty much just going to give us, to lay the foundation on why it is that we're here, in addition to what Dr. Musia has said. So just to know a bit about Mark, Dr. Mark Napier is a principal researcher and a research group leader at the CSIR, and he's an architect by profession, and he has a master's and a PhD in housing and development from the Newcastle University in the UK. Okay, Mark, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Katigani, and thanks also to Sepang for the opening words, I think, which gives it a really good context. I won't say too much, but I think you've seen the program for the day. The issue of circular economy and circular cities, I think, is very key. And having worked in sort of various areas, I was a fairly late adopter into the circular economy thinking, but I think it does have a lot to, gives us a lot to think about and a lot to work with. So I often go back to basics. The basic definition, I think Dr. Musia has also alluded to this already, but it's basically trying to change the existing paradigm, which is more linear, and particularly in growing economies, it tends to be a lot of consumption and a lot of waste. And see if we can't make it reduce that kind of linear situation and make it more circular. And obviously then the word economy gets thrown into the mix, which kind of implies that there's an economic sense to what is being proposed. and that we can also make this work as an economic model, let alone a societal and a political model. So if you take the normal footprint of cities, very, very large cities have an advantage in that they concentrate population in a very dense way. The efficient cities is a very efficient way to manage large populations. So density itself is not a problem. It's how it is designed in ways that mean that the footprint is contained in some way. It's not just pure consumption and waste. And if you take a sort of historical example of a fortified city, this one's in Italy, it was obviously designed then as a circular, it's literally circular, but it also was designed to be able to turn in on itself. We don't want that kind of insular turning in on itself kind of model. What we want is something that is much more efficient in the way, but is also open and inclusive. So to try to achieve these things is actually a big challenge. And I think that's why these kind of models and this kind of thinking that we'll see today is very important for us to try and get to grips with. And especially not just at a sort of a product or a materials or a building scale, but also as a system, as a much wider system in which we operate. And these kind of models that are showing here, there's been a lot of discussion, and there's actually some very significant mind shifts that come through with this kind of thinking. So I think our two speakers are very well qualified. We have particular challenges in this country, and the predominant model has been always to spread out, and that consumption, energy price hasn't been expensive, petrol's been fine, electricity's been fine until recently, in the sense of the cost. So we've gone for this very spread out and inefficient model in which the footprint is really big. So there's a lot for us to do, and I think our speakers, this is just some previous work we did where we tend to look at informal settlements as being messy and wasteful, but in fact, in terms of consumption, it's nothing compared to a suburban situation in which there's a lot more consumption and waste. But obviously we want something that's neither the left or the right. We want something that's humane, inclusive, and circular and efficient. So I won't say a lot about the speakers, but thank you very much for coming through to this event. And I think we've got a very good audience today. Mrs. uKESA, a senior lecturer at Nelson Mandela University, Dr. Khaled Davey at the University of Pretoria. Both have got extensive experience in this kind of thinking and in practice. So I'm really looking forward to their inputs, and also for them to also define and give us a much deeper understanding of what we're talking about in terms of being circular and regenerative. Okay, thanks a lot. Katakani, back to you.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you very much for setting the scene so beautifully, and reminding us that circularity is not simply about maybe recycling, but it's about like more urban thinking systems, as like how they are interconnected. They generate environmental, social, and economic value, which is quite significant. So with that context in mind, as you prepare for the first speaker, Mrs. Riet Kotia, as you are preparing, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome our first speaker, who is a senior lecturer in the Department of Architecture at the University of Nelson Mandela. Ms. Kotia's research explores how circular economy principles can be integrated into architectural education through locally grounded contexts, responsive approaches that support more inclusive and resource-conscious built environment. So her presentation is titled The Circular City. We already have recognition without romanticizing inequality. That is beautifully well said. Before she starts, I'd just like to remind colleagues that please do not hesitate if you have any questions, whatever pops in your mind, whatever comments you have, please let's engage through the chat. So Mrs. Renee Coetzee, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katikoni, for the gracious introduction, and thank you, Mark and Dr. Moisia, sorry. Yes, and thank you to the audience for your interest in this topic and for your attendance today. Much appreciated. Like Tatikani has said, my presentation today is about the circular practices that's already in our urban realm and how these will inform and may inform circular city thinking. So Dr. Napier and Dr. Moisa's discussions have already touched on the definition of the circular economy, and although it is a contested term, everybody has a different definition of the circular economy. We have to ask ourselves, what is the definition of a circular economy and a circular city today? And you will maybe form your own definition of it. And I formed my own definition of it based on what we know right now and based on what Dr. Napier has said about this. But we need to ask ourselves, what is a South African and an African circular city? And that's where that contextual groundedness comes in, and we will talk about this a little bit later, but that is where I think the power of being in Africa and the Global South is, because we are inherently innovative. That being said, I'm going to use the word circular city quite broadly, and I'm going to focus on the soft issues and not so much on the technological issues and the highly quantitative issues, because there's a lot of information about that out there. But for me, and through my readings and so on, the definition or a circular city can be defined as a city that keeps the value of the following things in use for much longer through its materials, its buildings, its spaces, infrastructure, skills, ecosystems. And how do we do it? We do it through maintenance, reuse, repair, recovery, adaptation, and then regeneration as well. So we are going to unpack these terms in this presentation. And just to maybe ground ourselves in a South African context, this concept of a circular city needs a very critical consideration. So many circular practices already exist in informal, local, and inherited systems, like Dr. Napier has alluded to. They are important, but they often arise because people have been excluded from formal infrastructure, affordable services, or proper material access. In other words, circular practices in the Global South often arises out of need. And our task here is to recognize the circular intelligence in these practices without romanticizing survival. So in the Global North, circular cities thinking often starts with future systems, smarter infrastructures, resource modeling, LCAs, LCAs, recycling targets, life cycle assessments, like I said, LCAs, and then new material technologies, which we also spoke about briefly in the previous session, and then also policy frameworks. And all of these are very, very important. Don't get me wrong here, but we forget that South African and African cities already contain circular practices in maintenance, reuse, repair, recovery, adaptation, and then regeneration as well. For example, 71% of waste disposal in Lagos is managed by informal waste pickers, according to a LinkedIn article I read earlier, a few days ago. And then, while the circular economy is not only about waste recycling, it is one of the most visible circular economy activities. And we need to protect, connect, and upgrade our inherent practices, whether it's recycling, whether it's repair, whether it's maintenance. We need to protect these practices through circular design thinking in our city. Architects, urban designers, and planners have not ignored informality in the past. For decades, there has been interest in incremental housing, self-built systems, participatory design, and architecture that responds to informal urban conditions, with great success, and as illustrated in these two examples. But Dr. Davey will also elaborate on some of these aspects in the next presentation. I'm not going in too deep about that. I want to show a few ideas regarding, like I said, the soft issues. Okay, so reading everyday circularity, how do we become more aware of it with, like I said, without romanticizing ideas that is actually out of survival strategies. Some of these activities are highly visible, others are quiet but essential. So maintenance, for example, is often overlooked, and yet it is central to keeping buildings, public spaces, infrastructure, and materials in use. And we need to design, it all starts with design. We need to design with this in mind. So reuse, for example, the next point or the next everyday circularity point that I want to touch is it may relate, as an example, to building components salvaged in a builder's yard, where buildings become material banks. And then, obviously, after its useful life, we will talk about reuse and adaptation just now. The third aspect, recovery. We know that e-waste recovery is one of the major circular city activities, but then we need to consider also how do we design spaces and safe spaces for the people who are mining these reusable materials from the e-waste. Regeneration, we can think about communities claiming unused public space. We use it for retail activities. We use it to restore ecological systems, or we use it for productive gardens. And these all fall under regeneration. And closely linked with regeneration, finally, is then adaptation. Think about buildings with one use, for example, a stadium that has a monofunctional use. When it becomes obsolete, just think about our stadiums after the World Cup. Not all became obsolete, just a side note there. But some of those obsolete stadiums can become community gardens, as shown here in this collage. Or, for example, an unused or a factory that's reached the end of its use in terms of industrial activities may become a housing development. So what I did with the following few slides is I made these small caselets, which could be defined as very high level case studies. And I've tried to show with each of these little case studies that we have both circular intelligence, but then we also have circular tensions. And sometimes I recently attended the AIUN conference where people talked about circular stories. We can have great intentions, but to put that in practice is what we are after. So yes. So these examples that I'm going to show you this afternoon is not perfect in any way, but they make us aware of all the hidden layers of circularity in urban settings. Okay, the first example is the Great Mosque in Djenné in Mali. Many of you may know this, but it showcases a few circular activities here, but the most visible one is the annual replastering of the mosque. So the circular logic here is collective maintenance and repair. Once a year, the community comes together and there's a festival and they replaster the building as part of their religious festival. So also, what is very interesting here is those timber protrusions, and they are specifically there to allow access for people to have a foothold to plaster the building with. And then it also shows us the logic of local material cycles and then also local climatic cycles, where the mud is replaced after the rainy season. People know what mud is all about. It washes away, but then we replace it when the time and the weather is right. What it teaches urban systems is that circularity can begin with community care and maintenance, and not only with end-of-life recycling. Then the critical caution that we must have here and that we must be very aware of is heritage politics, labor politics, unpaid labor, etc., climate exposure, and also the regional conflicts in Africa. And we need to be very aware of these real issues that may threaten or hamper these circular activities. The second example is closer to home in Warwick Junction. And this example is very important because it shows us that circularity is spatial. We are in an urban seminar and we need to talk about our urban spaces. And yeah, these spaces depends on whether infrastructure, roads, bridges, etc., whether that supports or disrupt existing livelihood systems. So daily we have about 6,000 to 9,000 traders with 450,000 people passing through this area. It is, if everyone knows it, it is a massive market, and a lot of money gets moved here, and it just shows us that we cannot ignore the informal economy's contribution to the circular economy. So it teaches us the urban systems on how to design, or how the design of infrastructure can either destroy or support existing livelihood systems. The critical caution here is contestation, management of such large areas, sanitation, safety, land pressure, and the risk of displacement. Those are very real risks, as we know. The next example is the Kibera public space projects in Nairobi. And those are incremental or progressive networks of community designed productive public spaces of underused, polluted and flood prone sites. So in design, we have the acronym called SLOPE, which means space left over after planning. And urban designers, town planners and architects may be very aware or knows, or we know what that term means. And because of our planning systems, etc., we have these spaces, these unused urban spaces that gets used in this instance, in this example, in various ways. We have community building, we have water management systems, flood risk reduction, we have shared infrastructure. Shared infrastructure is such an important aspect in circular economy thinking, and especially in circular cities. So we have community maintenance in this example, income generation, and then ecological remediation or regeneration, that we can call it that as well. Then what it teaches urban systems is that circularity is not about materials. We need to think broadly, and that's why the circular economy is difficult to define. It is an extremely broad system, and we need to think in systems as well. So it also teaches us that designing public space, that we need to design public space so that water, waste movement, livelihood, safety, and the ecological repair can work together in one space. The critical caution here is that we also need to consider maintenance, governance, safety, land pressure, sanitation, and also political support. The last example is a very simple example by the architect Francis Carey. And here he uses clay, local clay-based construction, passive ventilation, shaded roof strategies, and then also community construction participation to create a climate responsive building environment. And again, we cannot underestimate the power what a learning environment has over people and the next generation to live sustainably. So the circular logic here is local materials, passive cooling, skills transfer, community construction, and then also there's a long-term maintenance capacity because it is part of the people feel that the building is their own because they assisted with the construction as well. Then here also the circular design starts with climate, material knowledge, labor maintenance, and not only with waste recovery. Again, here we must be aware of the fact that we must not romanticize unpaid labor as well. Then, so across these examples, the key question here is what our formal systems, and I'm going to show the inverted commas, is what our formal systems in policy and practice will do next to enable these inherent practices. So my suggestion is 4 moves. First, we need to recognize we can map existing circular practices in our cities before we propose new interventions, before we come as the saviors to create a circular area, we must be aware of those inherent practices that's already there. Then second, we need to protect displace, or we need to avoid displacing informal workers, local practices or community systems just because it needs formalizing again. Then the third is to connect, align everyday circular practices with policy, bylaws, procurement, infrastructure and spatial planning. And a note on policy. Policy can do three things. It can erase, it can tolerate at the margins, or it can actively enable. And we need to make those choices when we make policy. And then finally, upgrade. We need to improve safety, dignity, access, and ecological protection through our design thinking and long-term maintenance and upgrading. So for me, this is a shift from seeing circularity as a technical model or a concept, a theoretical concept, to seeing it as a spatial and social responsibility that designers and policymakers have. So just the second last thing that I want to talk about is where this slide is all about where the built environment and policy meet. So I'm going to go through these 4 or 5 aspects to talk about if the first one, if maintenance matters, then budgets and contracts must reward long-term performance, not only once-off delivery. If shared spaces matters, then zoning and management agreements need to allow for multiple uses over time. We need to have flexible urban spaces. If repair and reuse matter, then procurement should ask for reused content, repairability, and life cycle value. Then if local livelihood systems matter, then policy must protect people's access to space, materials, and infrastructure. So those 5 things, a table next to each other, we need to look in that direction if we want to start to make our inherent circular economy work. And then finally, to conclude, I hope that this presentation encouraged everyone here to start to think about the invisible systemic issues first. Because a circular city is not only a city with better recycling, smarter infrastructure, or greener buildings. A circular city recognizes and retains the value of its people, its places, materials, and ecosystems. I thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Coetzee, for that very thought-provoking presentation. I think from my perspective, I appreciated the way you challenged us to pretty much recognize how circular practices that already exist within our cities, but you also reminded us that recognizing these practices should never just mean accepting or, in your words, romanticizing the inequalities that often underpin them. So with that said, because there aren't any questions yet, I do have a question myself, which is, I think one of the most compelling ideas in your presentation was the distinction between recognizing informal circular practices and romanticizing inequality. So from a policy perspective, how can maybe municipalities support these existing circular systems while ensuring that they also improve dignity, safety, and maybe long-term outcomes?
Thank you, Katikoni. I really appreciate the feedback. Yes, so in terms of policy and municipalities, I think we need to take a all stakeholders point of view where stakeholders are involved on all levels. And I know it's a wishful thinking to a certain degree, but the optimist in me is really, we need to take a step back and say, okay, what are our cities doing? And then also, and what we need to almost put on, we need to put on a hat and say, we cannot achieve sustainable development anywhere if our cities are not circular or we have a very strong circular economy, because that will drive sustainable development in a big sense. So I think in terms of municipalities, I think policymakers, and I'm not saying policymakers are not educated in the circular economy, not by all means, but policymakers need to be educated in the implications of the circular economy throughout. And technologies, we need to embrace technologies, but we also, like I said, we also need to embrace what is happening currently in our cities. And then also, without formalizing everything, without trying to formalize everything because we think we know, we need to say, yes, how can we support the waste pickers? There are so many amazing initiatives like the one that I showed on the collage, where the trolleys have been redesigned to accommodate certain things. So the waste pickers, and there are various examples of that in yeah, you can maybe just search online. I will leave a few links with you in the chat. So yeah, where just conditions are being better, and then also we have an opportunity as architects and designers to maybe design supporting spaces for those activities in our cities. For and also recognize what can we learn from indigenous knowledge systems, and how we have been inherently, for years and years ago, for millennia, we have been, as humans, we lived so lightly on the land, and we kind of forgot it when the industrial revolutions came around. So lots of good things happened, but we also need to recognize and respect all of these systems. I don't know, maybe I babbled a little bit, but I hope that answers your question to an extent. Thanks.
No, that is fine, Ms. Kutia. We will circle back to more discussions later.
Right.
So we will just quickly thank you so much for the engagement. So now we'll just prepare the stage for our next speaker, who, as I introduced her, she is Dr. Kaledi Davey. As she sets up, she is from the University of Pretoria. And her topic will be on circular and regenerative built environment, embracing regenerative practice at the University of Pretoria. So just a brief background, her bio will be posted on the chat, but Dr. Davey, her work sits at the intersection of architecture, digital innovation, urban strategy, and regenerative development. So through initiatives such as Africa BEDI, Urban Strategy Studio. So she is going to take us through how she explores how emerging technology, strategy leadership, and collaboration can help maybe transform the built environment. So without any further ado, Dr. Kaledi Davey, the stage is set for you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that opening, and I hope to be a compliment to my colleague, Riet. We work together informally as well, and I'm very happy to join her in this conversation. You can find me at the University of Pretoria in the Department of Architecture, and I'm actually trying to show you that with this presentation, how we go about the how in the built environment at different scales. For us, we are very interested in making it part of the norm of practice, not just a side or fringe topic, because if we don't build circular cities, we have a real problem. If you just think about the big scale of the built environment in itself, the numbers of buildings, the things we can count, right now in the world is 100 billion buildings in the world. And this is the stuff that exists, from huts to high-rises, satellite imagery. If you take the amount of people in the world and you compare it to the amount of buildings, we have 8 billion people, we have 100 billion buildings. That means for every human being, we have at least 12 plus buildings in existence. And those are the things we can count. Now, the vast majority of these construction activities are informal, but also are being formalized in the world. Even though cities are the biggest cause of all our problems, everybody knows how many they cause, they only occupy 3% of the Earth's surface. And this is a shocking imbalance for us. So circularity cannot be, and regenerative practice cannot be a fringe practice. It has to be norm and standard of the professional space, and it has to be norms and standards for our sector if we are facing this problem as a reality. Now, in the north, there's the sentiment that We must make existing buildings more energy efficient / circular / regenerative. And in the north, the idea is that we can do this because our cities have already been constructed. 80% of buildings in the developed world have already been constructed. So the emphasis of circularity, regenerative practice, and sustainability is very different to what we face, because in Africa, it's an inverted situation. 70% of our building stock, and this is just the buildings, not the infrastructure, not the dams, not the highways, not the anything else, is still to be built. And 200%, in other words, every 20 years, cities double in size, scale, and magnitude in our continent. And if we're going to build with this norm in mind, we are not going to be circular ever in our generation. We are actually starting with a clean slate in so many ways. However, we are following the patterns of our northern counterparts, and we're actually designing all the things in the built environment for landfill. 100% of things we build in the built environment goes to landfill. So we fundamentally have a mindset of that the thing we are building and the 80% of the continent that we are still going to build is going to be designed for death. And the numbers are shocking. Today is not a day for numbers, but you are pretty well aware of what these numbers mean. And the built environment as a sector, as an industry, as a community is responsible for this death creations of landfills, graveyards of cities. The problem is we are running out of the two biggest things that we need to build cities. And this is, we are literally running out of building sand in the world. You cannot use beach sand. You can only use river sand. And when you use river sand to make your concrete, your asphalt, whatever, your glass, everything that you touch is made out of sand. And the only place you can get it is from a river. And the only thing that you can dig out there is the riverbed. And the more you dig out the riverbed, the less sand you get, and that's a huge problem. Next to sand, we have water. And I'm not needing to preach to the choir about how important water is, especially in the built environment. You can do nothing if you do not have sand and water in the built environment, and we're running out of both. So then there's the job market. So in the context is that we have so much work in front of us in this continent. How we're going to do it matters a great deal. Where we're going to get our stuff from matters even more. And at the same time, the numbers of jobs that we are producing to be able to be circular, technologically inclined, and the numbers of people who have those skills is greatly going down. So we kind of sit in a situation where the context is driving us to say, if we go as business as usual, we will not have business. And this is kind of the talk I'm trying to get at today. Our response is that circularity, regenerative design, and the transition from the fourth to the sixth industrial revolution is our fundamental practice. And today I just want to show you at the different scales that we introduce this to our students and how it drives that practice mindset in our graduates and hopefully into the kind of people you can employ in your organizations to run these leadership issues. So I'm going to start at a very large scale for that's how our students go through the journey, and then we'll end at the technical scale, and maybe some of this will help you come up with some inspiration as well. So if you look at the built environment production system, this is it. Everything we mine from somewhere and it produces carbon, we build it, we literally destroy it, and we throw it in a landfill. This is every single thing that you see in the built environment goes through this process. However, to make it circular, we need to really think differently about how we get resources. If we keep on mining, eventually mines run out. But there's an alternative, it's called harvesting. And many of our materials can be harvested instead of mined. Then there's a different thing, we can start cultivating these materials and then circulate them for as long as possible in the built environment life cycle that many of you might be familiar with. And there's a lot of techniques to get there. But the principle is to move away from this into this. Then how we do it, today is not the day of how to circulate, but maybe just give you an idea of the types of things that we explore with our students so that they have clear guidelines for how they can design for circularity. The first thing is, if you design for circularity, you must accept that there is no such thing as waste. Waste doesn't exist in nature. It's a human construct. So the first thing you have to do is remember there is no such thing as waste with a circular mindset. Then there are techniques that you see on this left little table that you can, obviously, if you share the slideshow, you can take a look at them. And they have different outcomes. The 10 R's of circularity is what commonly is used, the number one over there, for maximizing in-use potential. But then there's other things that we can also do to maximize circulation outcomes in our design and construction and built environment sector, all the way to embodied carbon reduction, which is a very popular one, and energy recovery. And I think if you have these clear objectives of why you are circulating for in a formal sector or in the industry as large, it really helps to get focused and not just get stuck in the concept, but actually focus towards a goal. So our students start with this at a very large scale. Remember, I'm dealing with architecture students, so they're very aesthetically minded, but then we start showing them what it means in a city level when we are looking at cities as circular systems. And the studio I'm talking about is the Urban Strategy Studio, which is a postgraduate studio where we handle many of these topics from different angles. Basically, it boils down to is whoever wants to be in the room is welcome in the room. This is a very important point for us because if we keep this topic focused to a disciplinary solution, we're not really looking the elephant in the eye who is standing right in front of us in the room. So we try and encourage as many people as possible to participate in a challenge together, and then we go and try and figure it out. One of our favorite ones is the donut economics model, and it's by Kate Raworth, about a new kind of way to think about economics instead of a linear line that goes up, but more like a donut, a circle that has an upper and lower threshold. And I really encourage you, if you're interested in driving circular cities, please read Donut Economics and the City Portraits to help you with this, maybe a starting point for your own territories. So basically, for what we do is we look at donuts, we assess the city, the one in front of us, which is typically in Hatfield and Pretoria, and are the accessible places we can get to. And then students are challenged to conceptualize incredibly creatively how to shift the city system from a static, a linear waste city into a circular and regenerative place. This is deliberately a creative exercise so that there is no limits and preconceptions about what it means to be circular. We don't get hung up on the details. We care about the big picture shifts. And then students are going through and design responses that make two or more things possible, such as regenerative public space while being circular, etc., etc. The students are also encouraged then to work from a city scale all the way to a detail level scale and then propose solutions that are systemic, not just project-based. And this is the experience they go through to stimulate that creative mind about how to look at the city very differently, place-based, and make sure that regenerative public space and places are possible to make. Eventually, we do many of these kinds of projects to get the creative juices flowing and to get new ideas about what is possible when we circulate in cities. We also take this a step forward where we get a bit technical, which we love doing, where we say, well, if you only have, let's look at a streetscape, for example, how valuable is this place, literally, physically, or materially? And if you only have and we start making inventories of the literal things that are going on in our city, facades, waste, anything that we can find, anything that we can translate to materiality. We take these materialities and say, sure, if you only have a beer can, a baseball bat, and 3 straws, then you can only build with a beer can, a baseball bat, and 3 straws. And then the students are encouraged to, I just want to, am I still on? Yes. To design with a limited material palette. Now, the point of this is so that students and practitioners and the people who are involved in these projects become highly sensitive for the basic way that we are wasting because we are not thinking. But when we start thinking in the material sense, we can transform cities with what is at hand in situ, on site, in a system, in a finite system, and then start circulating into new and useful placemaking techniques. This is on the materiality side, on the big picture side, and we have loads of topics that we cycle through this studio to get our minds going. But on the other side, on the 4IR side, we also have to think circular, because we can't just depend on the industrial model to get us to useful 4IR if it creates so much waste. One of the things that we're also exploring quite deeply is to explore how the digital twin cities, how can information be circulated differently, so that when we have information that matters, that we can have cities drive themselves through a concept that we call urban digital twins. This means that we are looking at the invisible things, like Rieta said, but from a more a technical and professional space, and then translate these invisible things into useful things that we can transform into circular cities. So the digital twin city is a practice space where participants, public or students, participate in asking questions about how do we turn a city system like this precinct into a circular city system that cares about important thresholds in environment or production or management of precincts. Everything from heritage to water to autonomous, what do you call them? Autonomous sensor making activities are part of this explorative space, so that students who are maybe in chemical engineering, who never have exposure to city challenges, now apply their minds to a city system challenge, and not just the architects or not just the conventional city maker practitioner. One of our favorite ones was we literally mapped waste and litter and everything in our city, and we literally then built an urban digital twin to simulate what if we Uberized our waste instead of depending on macro metropolitans. What if we did precinct-based waste, and what if containers alert you to when they are full, and you don't have routes that only take up a lot of capital and time. And what if we transform cities from the waste perspective into a circular waste system, do it hyper-local, maybe 20 square kilometers at a time, and what it would look like when you have an urban digital twin, a real-life example of how waste is moving in almost like Uber on-demand waste, and how you can manage in small-scale footprints instead of large metropolitan contracts or procurement or logistics problems. And in other words, make smaller cities within cities so that you can start using technology in an effective and scalable manner, like this example is showing about how to improve the urban waste system. So the University of Pretoria takes the digital twin concept much further. It has since left the creative space in our studio and moved into real operational twinning practices with UP facilities management, where we're doing all sorts of experiments to improve our circularity at loads of levels, not just in the practical sense, but also in other applications. Let me click forward, like energy reduction or operational issues and so on. Now, the reason I'm telling you about digital twins is because it could be a very useful vehicle to achieve the reporting and monitoring and access of information about these practices in all sorts of different ways. It's also easier then if you have your circular system and it is digital and it inventoried well, and it is containable and it's manageable to a footprint that your organization can actually manage. Then suddenly you can do much better on other topics that you are challenged by, like carbon tax, sustainability, or sequestration issues, or in this case with the digital twin of trees, or tree forests, or UP trees. We can now actually have seasonal tracking about which trees get sick when, and we can do predictive tracking about when we should apply certain kinds of countermeasures and so on. So I think I'm showing you the digital twin side of circularity because I think it's a useful instrument to help us think forward about what it is that we are trying to circulate. So we don't just think backwards about what is in front of us, but also what is to come. And digital twins might be a very useful instrument to activate in many, many different use cases. Now, if you move down from the city or the precinct level, let's look at building and at the building strategy level. Those 80% of buildings yet to come are also going to replace buildings that are standing in poor conditions. And one of the examples is how do you adaptively reuse in a sense of this existing structure. But let's pretend you are demolishing cities and places and things. How can you go about circulating that activity, which is inevitable? Everything needs an upgrade, everything needs a replacement. And the way we are currently doing is everything goes to landfill whenever we refurbish something. This is a major issue. I think it's an understated issue, but it's also an enormous opportunity for loads of material recovery strategies and redevelopment strategies, which is going to be necessary to build the cities of Africa in our generation. So we go on these experiments as well, where we explore many means and methods to circulate the built environment fabric as it is today, so that we can build a better one that is fundamentally regenerative, not just inherited. So the students go through all sorts of fun experiments with our industry partners, and they do some research, and they come out of the other end to say to us, what have we learned when we are working towards deconstructing our cities for a future that makes more sense? So that's what we are handling with. We're looking at the hows and what is available for us in our built environment space to make the most impact. Now we've moved from the urban strategy to the building level, and now I just want to shift through from the 4th IR to the 6th IR. The 4th IR being the environment where we are, let's call it, digitally enabled. And the 6th IR, which is soon to come, is about an environment that we are nature-based and nature-based technologies. And this is something that we have a big passion for, because if you're going to be circular and regenerative, it's going to make sense to be based on nature, not based on machines. So the topic, and I'm glad that the department chair was speaking about the agricultural sector. This is an interest of ours, and if you want to talk more about it, please communicate with us. But we are exploring the potential of the agricultural sector to be transformed into materials for the built environment sector. In other words, what is the agricultural resource translation potential? What is going on in agriculture by the ton that can be transformed into hyperlocal contextual applications? In other words, how do we make the bio-based industry the built environment industry? So lots of topics that we tackle is the materiality of the agricultural sector by the different provinces and precincts and areas that we live in, and what it can become in the built environment sector, where additive manufacturing is a huge potential of 3D printing, because anything that is goo and mixed with a glue can be printed. And this actually puts us in a position to make contextually relevant long-term solutions that are replenishable from our agricultural sector. And we're very interested in this topic to explore it further. This particular one is the water hyacinth at many of our dams, which is an invasive plant that is creating massive issues in environmental risk and health. But it has also got lots of potential in a built environment material. So translating these agricultural, quote, waste, which shouldn't exist in a regenerative mind, into resource and recovery and translation for built environment application makes a lot of sense, because it's economically sensible and it also solves problems while creating new ideas. And this last one is my recent favorite from a student of mine. He just handed in his project, where he explores in the 6IR how we're absolutely wasteful, for example, in the Cape wine region, just with the grape pomace that we throw away by the ton every single day. And if we start thinking about it with the computational design and a bit of technology and 3D printing, how we can turn just that one waste stream, one stream, into built environment applications to build the cities of Africa. Now, would you rather live in a city of Africa? If we have the opportunity to build 80% of all the cities to come in our lifetime, which kind of environment would you like to build? The one that we inherit, that we have to keep maintaining, that is unfit for context, or one that is so contextual that it cannot be anything else? So this is the kind of topic that we're very interested in. We're building people to think about it. We are exploring lots of hows. And we are inviting you to help us come up with topics that build the leaders that will be in your teams that can drive these initiatives. So thank you very much. I hope that I covered everything I could and didn't go too far over time, but I'll be open for any questions as you have them.
Thank you, Dr. Davy, for that very interesting presentation. Also, I also have to note that we appreciate sharing your time and expertise and such great information with us while you're on leave. It's truly appreciated. And so, in the interest of time, Joanette, I note your question and all the other questions that might be on the way, because I know sometimes some colleagues, they're still internalizing the information. So please write those questions on the chat, and we will circle back to the engagements post this panel discussion. So Dr. Napier, as you set up, so now we're going to move on to the next segment of the session, which is the panel discussion, and that will be facilitated by Mark. And without any further ado, I'll leave the floor to you, Mark, to facilitate and drive that, and then we can come back to the questions afterwards.
Thanks, Katikani, and thanks, Khaled and Riet. Those are just incredible inputs. In this section, we're just going to have a quick discussion between the two presenters or amongst ourselves, and then we will, if you can put your questions in the chat, or you can come online afterwards and ask them. So just really one question. It's something that we also looked into when we looked at different types of circular practices in the built environment. But if circularity is gaining traction, it's kind of more gaining traction in academic circles and maybe policy circles. But when do you see this kind of thing becoming, do you see any signs of it becoming mainstream? You've talked in a way that encourages us to make it mainstream, and you've given us a vision of it becoming mainstream and the reasons why it should be. But do you think that it's being taken up in that sense, and what are the chances of it becoming sort of more standard practice? Because practically we've seen not everyone can move to Mars, so we are going to have to do with what we have. That's a debate at the moment. There has to be, something has to give. So Riet, I don't know if you want to first respond, and then I'll come to Khaled.
Yes, sure, Mark. I thank you for the question also, and I was thinking about this year, and the optimist in me says yes, it is totally possible, and while it is totally possible, we all need to get on board. And just the last part of that question, or the last statement, what will it take for circularity to become standard practice, is education, education, and education. We need to educate ourselves continuously. We need to, because we need to have CPD presentations. We need to foster what we learned in our practices. And again, for me, it's not putting your drawings, putting your practices where your mouth is. So don't only let it hover in academia and so on. It's essential that it hovers in academia for a while, but make it implementable and make it practical and make it measurable. I think that is a very important aspect. And then also the indigenous and local and informal practices, I don't want to say aside, because we include that as well, but that can also be measured, and as Khaled has shown and proven in her presentation. So I think education, and then also with our increase, it was also showing in Khaled's presentation, our increase in population. We are the only continent with a massive increase in population, and our building stock is waiting for us. And we have this opportunity to either go along with the linear make waste model, or we can truly work within a regenerative circular economy. So the choice is ours in Africa, and we have great leverage here.
Thanks. So that's a message of hope, and it's grounded in reality, because the opportunity is now. So in terms of the trajectories you've talked about. Khaled, your views on this?
I think circularity is much more of a business case than sustainability is, especially with the foundational fact that we do not have more sand and water to put to use in the traditional way. So on the one hand, we have to think very carefully about how we go about those core assumptions that we have resources available for deployment. So on the one side, it makes a lot of business sense for me to say sustainability costs money because we maintain a thing, but circularity is an option to recover resources, and in many ways. Then the second assumption, of which is why I brought in the idea of the 6IR, is when our resources deplete, we need alternatives that are replenishable. We can see this at the University of Pretoria. I'm not in that, I'm presenting on this today, but we have a massive drive for the timber construction for South Africa to bring back the useful material that can stand for thousands of years, thank you, Japan, called timber construction. Now, timber is a replenishable resource. It can be designed to be fully circular, where concrete and glass and steel cannot. And if you think of this bigger than the idea of just how do we recover in 10 hours, if you think of it in the business case of how do we maximize replenishable materials sectorally, then suddenly these other things make business sense. So for me, I think once we make that policy available, that recovery and replenishable is as desired as sustainability was, then all of a sudden businesses and industries and organizations, it will make sense to continue down that path. Just like the timber sector is now driving massive infrastructure development in timber construction all over the country. It will take time, but it makes business sense. So it's this kind of approach. I don't think that's why if you want to make it a side issue, you will always make it a side issue. But if you set it as fundamental to the success of 80% of the cities still to come, it's front and center.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's all about, it's what is a priority, what is set as a priority, and what is understood. Okay, I could come back with a lot of debate there, but I'm going to stop, and I'm going to hand back to Katikani because I see there are a couple of things in the chat, and then we can just, well, opening it up. But back to Katikani.
Okay, thank you for that engagement, Mark. I think it will also just to freshen up things a bit to get some voices in the room. So the people that are posing questions, also some people don't prefer typing, but we just want to let you know that you do also have the option to speak to the experts that are in the house. So please raise your hand and we will acknowledge you accordingly. So we can maybe circle back to the questions. Janet, do you prefer that we read out your question, or are you comfortable maybe addressing it through the mic? Yes, the microphones are now enabled. So I'm not sure if Janet is still here, but I remember she posed this question while you were presenting, Kaledi, and she was asking, what about an Uber type app for water recyclers? Yeah.
Hi. Oh,
Hi.
sorry. Yeah, no, yeah, please carry on. Sorry, I couldn't enable, but yeah, I mean, I think it's just maybe just quickly, yeah, just the idea is, it's these trolley guys and so on, and they have different things that they recycle, and people have different things they want to recycle, bringing sort of the supply to the acceptor kind of thing. But yeah, thanks.
Sure. I think I support Riet's concepts that she brought in, which is this untapped potential of what's already going on. What's already going on is most people in Africa and Southern Africa are naturally inclined to do resource recovery and do it in a communal way. We, the formal sector, have not tapped into that culture of how effective it is. So can we Uberize the water? Probably. I don't know if I'm the one who's going to do it, but I'm sure it is possible. I think there's loads of things that we are, like Rieta said, we're missing it because we're not paying attention to how effective it is in the informal economy. So to Uberize it is maybe less important than making it useful to circulate things. The technology on top may or may not be necessary, if I can say it like that. Riet, would you like to add to that?
No, I think, Khaled, you said it all. I think, but I also wanted just to add, it's a very good idea, and I think this platform is here for us to share ideas and to see where we can take it next. And yeah, we need to support what is already going on, and I've said it a couple of times in my presentation. So yeah, Ionette, I think it's a great idea to start to kick off, and maybe one can start something, a subcommittee or something in this space to move it forward and test it. We can only know if something will work if we test it and to see if people buy into that. But yeah, that's a brilliant idea.
It ties into me with this question in the chat about the water management, promoting water reuse, protecting groundwater. So my response is circularity is not a singular perspective solution. We can't just solve water and then be circular about water, because water is part of other things like dune rehabilitation strategies or preventing potholes. And all of these design issues about the environment that water is in. So if you want to circulate water, it would be helpful to have incentive about the environment so that the water must circulate with a purpose. So that you have design-supported reasons, which have policies behind them, which have capital behind them, that say it must be that this environment, where this building and these houses and this bridge will go, is environmentally regenerative, therefore it must circulate water. So that it's complementary objectives, not isolated objectives. Because if we're just going to stick on Uberize the water or fix the stormwater circulation, then we are really not circular in its holistic way of thinking about it. So whatever, that's why we start with the students as well. It's like, you must have at least 2 or 3 complementary outcomes with your strategy. Otherwise, you're not actually circulating in an environment. And in the built environment, everything we touch is we've made it. We did it, we touch it, we put it there. And if we want to solve the circularity of the built environment, we have to at least have 2 or 3 convergent topics that helps us circulate or regenerate that place. So it's a bit of a broad answer, but I think that's the way we would look at the problem.
Yes, I can also add to this. We just latch on to what Khaled is saying, that what we do here in this country is that our toilet water is potable water. We use potable water to construct with. We use potable water for everything, and we rarely recycle water. We act as if we are not a water scarce country, and we are actually, there are very, very sensitive and fragile water ecosystems in our country. So yes, it is a broad question, and we can sit here for hours to talk about water and water in construction and water in cities and catchment of water, and not design, the fast water runoff, flat hard surfaces that we have. But I think we need to take a step back also and look at how are we using our water and how are we using potable water, because it goes through treatment upon treatment upon treatment when it lands in our taps, but then we use it to wash our dishes and flush our toilets, etc. So again, it's a mind shift that we need to make, and like Khaled said, on all levels, on more than just one. So yeah, just to latch onto that.
Okay. Thank you, Khalees, for that. I guess you've already partially addressed those 2 water questions. Maybe we can skip to Maurice's questions, who's saying, good afternoon. Since informal settlements and informal economics are growing, I'm wondering how can the informal sector be integrated into efforts to make urban systems circular and regenerative?
Riet?
Yes.
Thank you for the question. I think, yeah, there are many initiatives that's already trickling into into informal systems, etc. And the most obvious example that I can use is the waste pickers, which I touched on a little bit, and where people are really thinking about how do we support waste pickers, how do we support informal, for example, informal trade. How do we support the person on the corner selling fruit and vegetables, or the person in Warwick Junction selling, there's already a great support system there, but how do we support more and more of that, and how do we use that, and perhaps, it lies in so many levels. We should, I think we should, and don't get me wrong here, but we should come in less with a savior mentality. We are going to save the world. We are going to plan for this and plan for that. We must get into what people are actually doing and how they are surviving in order to learn from people, in order to support these systems. And I can, we can only go back and to answer that question, how can the informal sector be integrated? First, we must teach ourselves and hear from the people in the informal sector what is going down and how we can assist. What are the immediate needs, and then what are the long-term needs. And again, I'm always wondering, and again, I'm using waste as an example. Recycling waste is not the only circular activity, but in terms of waste taking away, all of a sudden now implementing a global north system where waste is vacuumed into underwater or underground systems and taken directly without us even seeing the waste, taken away to a big incinerator that is bio-based, blah, blah, blah. That is not going to work for Africa. We are taking away people's livelihood. So how do we integrate it in our systems? For example, making an Uber app for waste pickers, or making an Uber app for like water circulation, etc., etc. So sorry, I'm repeating the Uber app thing because I think it's a great idea, but you can see where things are going. First, we must be aware of what's happening, and second, we must not try to save something that is already working. We must try to enhance it and support it. That's my long and short.
Can I compliment that? I think we spend a lot of our time on informality, but we forget a lot about small to medium enterprise. I'll give an example of the water crisis. It's a hot topic. As soon as water became an issue, how many new water shops started popping up? To supply and demand, the issue of water being unavailable for whatever use. And that small and medium business scale enterprise level is where you are going to find people getting very smart with how they circulate resources, how they build homes, how they move bakkies with stuff around, and how they maintain their livelihoods. So I wouldn't say the informality is our only, it's a very strong place to start looking, but small to medium enterprise is probably stronger because they have an incentive to stay a business. And once we are tapping in, making it available for, making it possible for small to medium enterprises to tap into a sustainable business model when they do resource recovery, maybe we will find loads of ways that not just Ubering our waste pickers, but loads of ways that people will retain the practice because they are coupled to it because it's their livelihood. So just like the water stores, family-owned water bottling stores that I see almost everywhere I go now, came from a place of there is no water, we can't trust the water, whatever else, business opportunity. I think there's loads of opportunities that we could explore in the SME space to complement informality practice and to lead the big movers into doing it as well.
Okay. So colleagues, thank you so much for the engagement on the chat. We have another question. So we'll just answer these two questions that are outstanding as we round out or round off this discussion. So the next question is from Dinam Kize, who is asking, there are many innovative ideas in academia. In your experience, how can this translate into being adopted by the government into policies, as many of your examples focus on public spaces or facilities?
Elaine, I think you can start this one.
Okay, remember we are training people. So it's very useful for us to educate and train professionals in public space environments because it teaches them a lot about the contested of space, the history. You know, for us as educators, public space is a very useful place for us to democratize this learning and make our students who come from many different backgrounds and histories sensitive to what they have in common and sensitive to what public space should mean, which is for us, the public. So many of these public space practices is one-to-one translatable to any private project. But we use public space because it's a very good education opportunity for us as educators. I hope that is the simple and quick answer for that one.
Any addition, Riet?
Just a small thing. There is a concept in circular economy thinking, space as service, and I think this just latches on. I'm just going to say this sentence: spaces must serve, and it can be not only one space dedicated to one use. We should dedicate spaces to multiple uses.
Okay. So the last question is from M. Chwewu, who's asking, how can we promote or improve circularity in food waste sector?
So I've had fun with this topic for many studios, but I think it really matters to say this separation at source is obviously always the big issue when it comes to the food sector. But to the food industry, that's a different topic. So if you're going to go business by business, you're going to have small things that you can do, but it has to make business sense to do them. But sectorally, I think there's more opportunity at the big industry level, where things come from and where they go at the end of the day. I think that's where the big innovations lie. For example, the idea with the winelands. It's so my student he investigated just the waste in the Cape Winelands region on just all the grape husks that they throw away after they pulp the grape, and they throw away everything. That entire husk, all 200,000 tons a year, is going to a landfill somewhere. It's unthought through. Now, it's not classic food system waste, but if you think of it as a scale and the industry level, if there was a practice for translating that into a valuable thing, then we will stop throwing the thing away. And at that industrial level, I think that is where the government and institutions at that scale will have a huge contribution when they start articulating the translation of value. So that the 200,000 tons just of the grape husk, the little pulp that is left over, which nobody uses for anything, very few farmers, turns out, use it properly. If it's translated into a higher value product that is replenishable, et cetera, suddenly 200,000 tons is a big number that can go very far and spread its legs into many applications. And it's so food at source, there's thousands of technical ways to do it at a restaurant and household level. But I think the big winners are in industrial scale thinking, where you actually can make a difference with high numbers, which translates down the stream.
Okay. Riet?
No, I completely agree. It starts on an industrial scale, because also if you want to start to reuse any type of food waste or any type of agricultural waste, you need a lot of it to build buildings and to build building products. So for example, if you want to convert that non-crete example that Dr. Napier has mentioned, where the black wattle invasive species are being processed to as an additive to the non-crete or to the so-called concrete, you need a lot of that to work. But
the same applies to waste to energy. So if you don't think at big scales, if you don't think in tonnage a day, you're missing the point. And you're also missing the opportunity. You can't retain a waste to energy plant if you're under minimum waste for the input. You have to have a minimum to make that plant useful. So circularity isn't a solution to stop wasting. It is a way to make waste completely irrelevant because it's being used for something else. It does not exist. And that is the big shift in mentality that you make when you practice it. You say, if waste doesn't exist, it means it's materials in transition. Where are they coming from? Where they're going to? Because waste cannot exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for the engagement. Thanks to our speakers. I see there's still more questions coming up. I think maybe we can say we're still open to take it offline. I don't know if our speakers are also welcome to maybe receive emails and continue with the engagement offline, because in the interest of time, we might not be able to address all those questions as we would like to. So I'd like to draw today's discussion to a close, and I'd like to sincerely thank our speakers for sharing their experience, their expertise, and their very thoughtful reflection on what it means to build cities that are more resilient and inclusive. So today's conversation really has reminded us that circularity is not simply just a technical solution, whether through it, be it recognizing everyday, circular practices, where we looked at how do we embrace innovation and how do we strengthen partnerships, etc. So on behalf of uKESA, the CSIR, and the DSTI, thank you for everyone who joined us and contributed to today's discussion. It has been such a pleasure on my part moderating this discussion, but I'll now hand over to Dr. Mark Napier, who will officially make the closing remarks. Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Katikani, and thanks for your role in this. It's the observations and continuity has been really appreciated. And thanks to Matsubu and Rene, who in the back room and made it all happen in terms of publicity. Thanks a lot to our audience. We've thanked our speakers. Again, thank you very much. And the audience we've all been supported by the DSTI, I think, in being able to create this platform, this urban knowledge sharing platform. So I think that's also worth appreciating. Just to reinforce, I think there's been a lot of requests for presentations. We'll put those with permission of the speakers on our event page in the coming days, as well as a link to a recording. In case you remember something wise that somebody said during these proceedings, like waste does not exist, or, and what is the context? These things are really important, and to be able to go back and just see what was said is really useful. So thank you to everybody. And then we'll also just send people a reminder that we've put those presentations on that page, when it's all lodged there. Okay, brilliant. Thanks everyone so much. That was really, really useful.
Thank you. And it was a nice webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.